recommence our hearing, and we have representatives from Astoria, Honda, Brighton, who are appearing via video conference and teleconference. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses and evidence has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, will you please state your full names and the capacities in which you appear today? And we'll start with you, Mr. Klein.
Yes, Ronald George Klein. I am the dealer principal at Astoria, Honda, Brighton.
Mr. Avis.
Mike Richard Avis. I'm the General Manager and Ron and I are both Directors of Astoria, Honda, Brighton.
Thank you. I will now invite you to make a short opening statement, and at the conclusion of your remarks, I'll invite Senator O'Neill to commence with questions.
Thank you, Chair.
Sure. Firstly, thank you very much for the opportunity to appear and give evidence today. I'm sure that you've all read our submission, but we'd like to emphasise that our submission is a complete statement of fact. Astoria Honda has been in continuous operation as a Honda dealer for 53 years. My business partner, Ron Klein, his father, Henry, was a pioneer for the brand in Australia and started selling Hondas in Melbourne in 1967. It wasn't until 1969 that Honda Japan arrived and Honda Australia was established. Over the ensuing decades, Astoria Honda has won multiple awards in all facets of the Honda business. We are a high-performing dealer, and in 2019 we sold more Hondas in Australia than any other dealer. Astoria Honda is also the largest spare parts dealer and was a finalist in the 2019 Honda National Dream Awards. Now, Honda Australia have made a decision to change their business model from dealer to agency. It did so by unlawfully terminating the majority of their metropolitan dealer sites partway through their 5-year agreements. We were given a notice of termination on the 23rd of March 2020 without any prior notice from Honda Australia to take effect in June 2021. Our dealer agreement was due to expire on the 30th of June 2023. Understandably, we were bitterly disappointed. However, we respect the decision taken and assume that adequate compensation would be provided. Nothing could be further from the truth. Given the manner in which the termination notice was served on us under the veil of covering letter marked "without prejudice," we have been forced to serve a writ on Honda Australia in the Supreme Court of Victoria to obtain a ruling whether the termination notice was a repudiation of our dealer agreement for the purpose of making a damages claim. Our damages in the context of a repudiation claim is only the loss of financial benefit of not being able to perform our dealer agreement for the remainder of its term. However, this gives us nothing with respect to the loss of the goodwill in our dealership, which we have developed over 53 years. We have over 34,000 customers on our database. In order to be compensated for our goodwill, we need to establish that Honda Australia has engaged in misleading or deceptive conduct or acted unconscionably towards us. To do this, we need to be able to show that Honda Australia knew that it was planning to undertake a strategic review which might lead to the termination of dealers prior to us entering our current dealer agreement in 2018, and they had a duty to disclose that to us. Our lawyers have written to Honda Japan and asked for documents showing when the strategic review that ultimately led to the decision to proceed to an agency model was first considered. They were not even given the courtesy of a response. Our lawyers sent the same request to Honda Australia, and it has been flatly refused, and they flatly refused to provide any documents. As a consequence, we are now forced to issue another court proceeding for pre-action discovery against Honda Australia and Honda Japan to obtain the documents so that we can determine if we have a basis to make a claim for compensation over the loss of the goodwill in our dealership. The change of business model from dealership to agency does not happen overnight. We would expect that Honda Australia and Honda Japan have documents regarding their plans to launch an agency model that predate us entering into our dealer agreements in July 18. Now, other such brands, such as Mercedes, we mentioned, are moving to a similar model. Their submission states that they've been in consultation with their dealers since 2016, transition in 2022. That is 6 years. For the past 50 years, Honda dealerships have been bought and sold with the knowledge and approval of Honda Australia. In fact, under the dealer agreement, Honda Australia have an overriding option to purchase the dealership at a price no less favourable than is being offered by the prospective purchaser. We believe the collective goodwill component of the terminated dealers would be in the order of hundreds of millions of dollars. Through the unlawful act of Honda Australia, this amount has been wiped off the balance sheets of the dealers' businesses as their option to sell has been removed. Having enjoyed a strong professional relationship with Honda Australia for over 50 years, we are not confrontationalists and we are not litigious. We have been forced into this position due to Honda Australia's refusal to pay fair and reasonable compensation. We have no option but to embark on court proceedings in order to protect our commercial interests that we built up over half a century. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Senator O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr Avis, for the opening submission and for your written submission as well. Can I just say, as a senator, that we rely on citizens to be brave enough to stand up and tell the truth about what's happening in their communities, whether that's in the field of business or defence or any part of our community. There aren't many people in your industry who are willing to take the risk of going to court against such a big entity as Honda in this instance. And neither are there many car dealers who have either the will, the time or the money to undertake the task that you're undertaking for the reasons that you've articulated. Now, a court will determine matters of law, and I'm not going to pretend to be able to do anything to resolve your situation, but I sincerely thank you for bringing the detail of this matter forward so that it can go on the public record and people can understand that how fragile what they thought was a very long and stable business model now is. So sincere thanks for that. Can I just go back to some of the facts? You signed your dealer agreement with Honda Australia in June 2018. Is that correct, Mr Avis?
Well, that's correct, yes.
2 years after you signed that, in the course of this year, you state that Honda terminated your agreement with them without notice. How long did you expect your dealer agreement that you signed in 2018 to go for, Mr Avis?
We signed for a 5-year term expiring in June 23. They gave us notice on the 23rd of March of a termination for us to be terminated in June 21.
And that's the matter that you are going to seek redress from in the courts?
That's correct.
Can you inform the committee of the practical impact of the termination of this agreement with Honda? For example, how much will it cost for you to refit your premises with Honda absent?
Well, we have a showroom, for instance, we have a showroom which is a custom-built showroom. A few years ago, the front of the showroom was redesigned. It's 3 stories. It's got a big sail on the roof, a big red wall. It is a Honda showroom. That's it. To change that obviously is hundreds of thousands of dollars for a start. To change it into some other form of use. The other implications, of course, major staff implications. We have very loyal staff. Some staff have been with us for over 30 years. It's so disappointing that we've been put in this position and they have been put in this position. We're obviously actively trying to find another franchise or something to fill that space. Had we known earlier, there were other opportunities that we could have pursued. However, we have missed out because we were just the wrong place at the wrong time. And currently we have nothing to replace quite a substantial facility in quite an expensive area of Melbourne.
So people who don't know about your business, Mr. Avis, might say, look, perhaps they were just one of the businesses that wasn't going so well, and that they should have, that they were going down anyway, and Honda had every right to do this. What do you say to that kind of commentary, Mr. Avis?
We're a profitable business. We've always been a profitable business. We have very good economies of scale. We are multi-franchise, so we can obviously, the fixed overheads we can spread across different franchises, which is the best modus operandi today. It's very expensive. You've either got to have a very good franchise with very good market share, or you're multi-franchise, which is what we are. So we're able to cover our expenses across, and yes, we are profitable.
In terms of the loss of your relationship with Honda, how much do you think that will cost in terms of loss of staff for you, Mr. Avis?
We've already started losing staff because we were in a situation where we were informed that when we received the notice of termination, there was the paperwork we received. I think it had 4 notes of confidentiality holding us to our dealer agreement, the confidentiality clause in our dealer agreement. And all we were allowed to do is tell our staff, but then they had to be under a confidentiality agreement. We weren't allowed to tell customers, which has been very difficult because of the Honda situation being in the news. We have had customers coming to us and asking us if we're going to be a Honda dealer. And there are emails which I have with senior management of Honda Australia saying, what do I do here? I'm not going to lie to them. You're putting us in a very compromised position here because you've done this all without prejudice. You're holding us to our dealer agreement. I'm in a position where I've got to tell a lie to my customer, and I said in the email, my personal integrity will not allow me to do it.
So they've placed you in an extremely difficult position, Mr. Avis. So what you've just said there is essentially you've been silenced in the agreement, and you've been silenced to a point where basically Honda have constructed a pathway to force you to lie to your Australian customers?
They've forced us into a situation where we can't tell the truth. If asked a direct question, will you be a Honda dealer in the future? The answer I think came through from the PR department was, you will be looked after in the future by a Honda dealer, or something along those lines. We weren't allowed to tell the customers that we had been terminated.
So it sounds like if they've got to the stage where they've got prepared scripts for you to use as your cover, not
Correct.
an outright lie, but as close to it as you can get, that this must have
Correct.
been some time in preparation.
Well, this is, they sent that to us obviously post the actual notice of termination. When customers started to come to us, then they were reactive. You know, we also had a situation where we were terminated. There were 14 dealers in Melbourne. 11 dealership sites have been terminated, leaving 3. Now, we had a situation where one of those agency dealers was telling customers that other dealers wouldn't be a dealer in the future.
So not everybody got the memo to get in on the deception. So the 3 dealers that have been advantaged can immediately bank that advantage because they can say, we will be a dealer, and they in fact are telling people that you're lying to them. Other Honda dealers have been set up against you.
In effect, yes.
That's disgraceful. I don't know a single Australian who would think that that's okay. And I thank you for putting that on the record, because that's the kind of thing that really matters. People expect the truth to be told in business, and they certainly would be unaware of the sorts of pressure that you're coming under from these large overseas companies to treat Australians in that way. You said that there's the cost of the showroom. Did Honda offer to pay the costs for your showroom when they decided to terminate?
No, they did pay the costs of the initial frontage, and that was 7 or 8 years ago. They did pay that cost, but there has been no offer of compensation on facilities, redundancies, As I said, we have already lost staff, and what do we say to them? We lost a couple in the last 2 weeks. Very, very good, loyal staff. One I think has been there for 14 years, and he came to my business partner and said, "Look, I've been offered this job. I know we won't be a Honda dealer shortly. I wasn't in on the conversation, but what can my business partner say? What can he say? Unfortunately, yeah, go. You've got an opportunity, because we can't keep all our staff till June next year and expect them all to suddenly find another job. We are dead men walking."
So this is exactly what I understand about small business in Australia. Small business people are decent, hardworking people. They have an incredible loyalty to their staff, because that's what makes businesses successful. And I think it's a disgrace that you find yourself, like so many other automotive dealers across the country, in this invidious position. Did Honda offer to pay for any of the goodwill of the successful business that you traded?
Nothing.
Did Honda offer any compensation to the over 100 people you employ?
Nothing.
Did
They offered through an agency counselling.
Okay, so they knew it would cause distress, so they offered counselling as their PR response to that, the reality of Australians losing their jobs. And they did this in the middle of a pandemic.
Well, we received, correct. This was end of March, and we received documents that are, processed documents. We received all under the cover of without prejudice, and we're not allowed to say anything, which is the reason why so many Honda dealers have been muzzled through this process.
It's important that people understand, though, that today you are here giving evidence to the Senate and that you are protected by privilege. There were words read out at the beginning of this hearing, and I know that you've been advised what that means, but you cannot be subject to intimidation from anyone in light of the evidence you've given today, which is why I made a bit of a song and dance about thanking you for coming forward to actually put the truth about what's going on the record. You state that the Fordham Accountancy Group evaluated the Honda dealer's damages claim, and it was calculated to be 4 times more than the offer made by Honda Australia. Well,
That's correct.
why are the offers so different, in your opinion?
Okay, the main reason was, firstly, their method of calculation. We report our figures every month to the manufacturer. First thing is that there are various lines in the report, and they have not picked up all the lines of income. Some of the income was actually income that they paid to us.
So when you refer to they in that sentence, you're talking about Honda. Is that correct, Mr. Avis?
Honda Australia.
Honda
Correct,
Australia,
yeah.
using the information you give them,
Yes.
arbitrarily
Yes, correct.
selected from that data what they would and wouldn't use, and came up with a compensation figure.
Yes. Now also, having said that, Ron and I have been in business for a long time. Our kids grew up together. We've been together a long time. And Honda was the original franchise. Since then, we've added another 6. I think 5 or 6, can't remember. And I'd like to say we have great relationships with our OEMs. This is not usual. This is not about the imbalance of power. This is about the abuse of the imbalance of power. We have great relationships with our OEMs, so I'd like to stress that.
Thank you.
But we were in a situation where, unfortunately, we were just forced down this track. We just had no other recourse.
Did Honda make it clear to you why they terminated your agreement?
No.
What is your sense of why they did that and the timing of that, Mr. Avis? I know it's speculation, but you are an expert in this area.
Yeah, we can speculate, and I don't like to speculate. But they gave us various reasons that were all on their grounds. We're losing money. We've got to, changing the business model, rationalised, whatever. It was just, it didn't really matter. There was nothing that was specific to us. We find it, and people are still surprised. Why would you sack your biggest dealer with your highest levels, your highest KPIs? I mean, we've been doing the job for them for 50 years and we got sacked.
It does seem
It just seems
inexplicable.
incongruous.
Yeah, it does. It seems
it's-
inexplicable. In respect of... Go on, Mr Avis.
I was saying, however, leading on from that, what we understand is that the 3 agency dealers who are left out of the 14, we understand, and this is speculating, so I'll add that, that these agency dealers are supposed to be setting up camp in our PMA.
Which is your area of trading.
Which is our geographical area,
yes.
So in other words, the number of dealer points are going to increase from 3 to 5 or 6 or whatever it's going to be. And then, of course, we've sold thousands and thousands of Hondas into this area and they'll get it for nothing.
Right. So I'll come to that in a section. I'll come to that in a minute. But one of the concerns that I have after hearing the evidence from the National Automobile Dealers Association of the United States is that if this model is copied and there's a reduction in competition within the Australian market, and that dealers like Honda can just actually say that, look, there's one price point, it's $17,690, take it or leave it, that all of the competition that helps people get a good deal when they're purchasing their car will be removed. 14 down to 3 is a reduction in competition immediately, isn't it, Mr Avis?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
In respect to your customer data, I understand that it's organised in a way that's specific to your trade, and it could be protected under intellectual property law. You say in your submission that that data that you own about your customers, actually Honda Australia are intending to gift as a customer database to the new agency dealers, the 3 that you've just described. Why is Honda not offering you any compensation for that intellectual property and your customer database? If they think it's of value for somebody else, why do you not get anything for that?
Well, they obviously think it's value because as part of the exit deed, we have to sign it over.
Right, okay. Could you please outline for the benefit of the committee the steps that you undertook to resolve the dispute between yourselves and Honda Australia prior to seeking recourse through the courts?
Well, we engaged lawyers, a group of us lawyers, HWL Ebsworth, to act on our behalf, and we went through mediation, and unfortunately that got nowhere. And Ron and I were talking during this mediation, and because this is so foreign to us, you know, we're not litigants. We've had great relationships with Honda for the last 50 years. You know, I mean, the Japanese are honourable people. We find it remarkable that this is happening, you know, to us and to everybody. But as a consequence of that, we discussed it, and I said to Ron, I said, let's send an email to Stephen Collins and ask him, you know, let's try and talk about this man to man, face to face. And I'll have a copy of the email here, which we sent, basically saying, look, you know, can we talk about this? You know, I'm very happy to display with a copy of it. We had no reply, and that was part of the. Then the mediation kept going, and nothing, and here we are today.
So, Mr Avis, I'm sure that you have some idea about how expensive that path you're on is. Without disclosing that, I'm just going to ask you, would binding arbitration enabled by government legislation be a more effective, cost-effective and time-effective way of resolving such a dispute as you're in right now?
I believe so. I don't know if Ron's got any thoughts on that. I certainly believe so.
Yes,
Mr Klein?
Yes, that I would suggest that would be certainly a step in the right direction.
I'm sure that you're aware of the department's draft voluntary principles. We heard evidence from Mr Vortman of the AADA that these principles that are being discussed have actually come out of the very context that you're describing, but that they appear to be being proffered as voluntary principles. Does the government need to pony up basically and deliver mandatory principles into this sector to provide the protection that Australian automotive traders need and the benefits that flow through to consumers?
I would suggest yes. I mean, just using our own personal experience, those draft suggestions would certainly be of some assistance in a situation like a manufacturer exiting the industry or indeed changing their distribution model. I mean, in this particular case with Honda, they have culled over 1/3 of their national dealers, mainly metropolitan dealers, which are their larger ones. So it would certainly be of assistance if it was mandatory.
Yeah, and you're not suggesting that there should be complete restriction on change of models as things emerge, but that if there is, for the want of a better term, a divorce, that there need to be rules around that are fair and reasonable.
That is correct.
Okay. My next questions go to some concerns I have about fair and reasonable, frankly. You've given in your evidence this morning to me that you communicated directly with Honda, having had a great relationship over decades that you thought would be able to help you resolve the matter. Honda didn't respond, but somebody responded on behalf of Honda. Is that correct?
Yes. During the course of the negotiations regarding compensation, Honda were represented by Deloitte's accountancy firm, and they did all the negotiations with Honda in the background and completely silent as far as we were concerned.
So could you please outline to the committee your experience with Deloitte, acting for Honda?
Well, we found Deloitte's very, very intimidating. We found them, it was a very one-sided negotiation regarding adequate compensation. They used intimidatory tactics, which are outlined in our submissions, and it was very one-sided.
So in terms of the intimidatory tactics that were employed on your evidence by Deloitte, you argue in your submission that they said to you, any litigation from you would be very protracted, would take a very long time, and that would be their intention. What would the benefit of making a long period in court be for Deloitte, and why do you think they said that to you?
Simply because they were indicating that it's going to be long, expensive, and that the result you would get would be no more favourable than what they're offering. To me, that's intimidatory. It's outrageous to say the least, and it was designed to intimidate dealers from not pursuing any further action, and of course, quite a number did not pursue any further action.
So in addition to your own experience of that intimidatory behaviour, as you describe it, Mr. Klein, you've just put on the record that this was the standard operating model of Deloitte in its interactions with other dealers that you know of, but who are, well, perhaps too frightened to speak out. Is that the case?
Senator O'Neill, sorry.
That is correct.
Finally, if I can, Chair, thank you for your indulgence. You have been very clear in your submission that Deloitte indicated to you, if you're unsuccessful, that costs would be pursued from you on an indemnity basis. Are you the only company that you know to have received that sort of communication from Deloitte? And what do you think the purpose of those comments were from the representative of Honda through Deloitte?
I believe that was conveyed to other dealers, and others have shared that with me confidentially, that those tactics were used on other dealers, and I believe there's actually some evidence of that in writing.
In order to protect your company and other Australian businesses, what is your request of the government?
Well, I would suggest that any legislation outlining a compensation formula should be included in any dealer agreement in the event of a divorce, as you call it, a change of distribution model, exiting Australia. I think it would take the ambiguity out of any argument pertaining to compensation, goodwill, and the customer database.
And does that need to be based on mandatory principles, or do you think a voluntary code would cut the mustard with companies like Deloitte and Honda?
My opinion, and my opinion only, mandatory.
So it's a business, you're a business that's asking the government to act to support you to be able to do your business.
That is correct.
Thank you very much, Mr. Klein and Mr. Avis, and thank you, Chair.
I think
Thank you very much.
Senator
Yes,
Pratt's
I
back
am
in charge.
here. I just had a couple of questions in terms of the brand as it's developed in your local area relative to other areas. In terms of your own market information, are you precluded from sharing market information with other dealers? So I guess you would be concerned that the viability of an agent type model has been built up through your own marketing and brand awareness that you've done in the areas that you market to.
Mark?
Yeah, well, sorry. Yeah, I'll say. Yeah, we in our area, we punch well above our weight. The Honda percentage in our area is very high, but that's been built up over 50 years. So for someone else just to come in and take over that area, I mean, it's an absolute gold mine for someone. Absolute gold mine.
Well, depending on the conditions under which Honda allows them to trade. So you would argue that Honda is essentially taking that value away from you and either capturing it for themselves or for whichever agents are allowed into the area. So you're well aware that Honda's brand penetration in your area is higher than in other areas?
Yes, we are. Yes.
Okay. And was there any value on that placed in your compensation package?
None whatsoever.
None whatsoever, other than where volume might have been reflected in any of the...
The compensation, financial compensation, was based on their calculation of our profitability.
Yeah, and clearly they would be... So they're really trying to, on one hand, capture that profitability, which is higher than they say it is for themselves, and yet they have cancelled. Have they cancelled? How many dealerships have they cancelled as a whole in terms of which ones have they targeted?
What the number of dealers?
Let me answer that, please.
Yep.
They have, from our knowledge, and again, Honda have been relatively confidential about these numbers, and they haven't disclosed anything in terms of these numbers to the public or to the other dealers. But we are of the view it's somewhere between 30 and 40 dealers nationally, mainly metropolitan.
So do you suspect they have targeted profitable dealers so that they can capture that value for themselves?
Look, that's an assumption one could make. We have no idea what criteria they have used to select their agency dealers.
And because you haven't converted into accepting the contract, the compensation, you're unaware of what those contract terms will be for agency dealers relative to your current conditions?
We are completely unaware of what's being offered to agency dealers.
Do you, in terms of that value that you have within your dealership, how is it that it should be properly recognised within a franchise contract? Clearly there's the brand as developed by Honda, and then there's the brand that you develop, there's the brand, of course, that you develop locally, including through your visibility, your local marketing, and customer reputation that you develop locally. Do you know where you sit, relatively speaking, in terms of how much marketing and local work you've done relative to other dealers might be?
No, we're not aware of how we would compare to others in that area, but we are certainly aware that we are Honda's number one selling, or in 2019, the last full calendar year, we were Honda's largest selling Honda motor vehicle dealer in Australia, and also we have been the largest Honda spare parts dealer in Australia for approximately the last 15 years.
Now, because you're the largest, does that mean you're able to cut better deals on the prices of your vehicles from Honda, or you're unaware of kind of how that works relative to other companies, to other dealerships?
No, in terms of Honda, everybody pays the same for the vehicles. It's a very level playing field from a purchasing point of view.
Okay, so their only motivation, therefore, it can't be because you're gouging them in a way that other dealers aren't unfairly. It can only be in large part that they've recognised that they're really trying to capture the value of the business that you've built up. On one hand, saying this is what you're worth in compensation, and that's recognised as true value, where on the other hand, you can only surmise that they've made their own calculations about the value of your brand that they'd like to capture for themselves.
Well, we feel that, gifting our goodwill and our customer database to an agency dealer is completely unacceptable. And if that's the way that Honda want to go, we deserve fair and reasonable compensation, and that is our position.
Yeah. Hence, you're headed to court. Thank you very much for your evidence today. And as Chair, I echo Senator O'Neill and our opening remarks in relation to the impact of parliamentary privilege, that you shouldn't experience any detriment because of this evidence today. And if you feel you have, do at any stage, please reach out to the Parliament.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you and good luck.
Were there any other questions? I don't believe so. We are slightly over the time that we'd allotted. So we're now going to get on board